The world seemed to stop when Diane Keaton passed away. I still can't forget the moment I heard she left us at 79, in the quiet of her California home. Hollywood's glow seemed to fade. She wasn't just an actress, she was the heartbeat of an era. Every smile, every glance carried gentleness and courage. Films like The Godfather and Annie Hall weren't just art, they were messages about love, pain, and imperfection. Yet behind that laughter, Diane lived through loneliness and loss that no one could see. All of it became her soul, weaving an unforgettable legacy. Her laughter now fades, leaving the silence of a legend. Hit like if you want to give Diane Keaton a warm farewell, and type "Rest in Peace Diane Keaton" to light a candle for her soul. It is hard to believe that the woman who once made the whole world shine with her smile and her gaze began her life in quiet solitude. I imagine Diane Keaton, as a little girl, growing up under the golden sunlight of Los Angeles, a city where perfection was revered and emotions were the easiest thing to hide. Her father, John Keaton, was a strict engineer who believed that discipline was the only way to express love. Her mother, Dorothy Diane Keaton, once radiated ambition when she was crowned Miss Los Angeles, but that glow quickly faded under the pressures and disappointments of family life. Outside, their home appeared perfect, 4 children lined up for dinner, laughter ringing when guests arrived, everything seemingly in order. But behind that mask, a heavy silence seemed to seep into every breath Diane took. She once said, "We didn't talk about feelings. We just lived in them." The words may sound simple, but they contained a lifetime, a place where Diane began learning to turn silence into a refined kind of art. Diane's childhood memories passed like slow-motion films. As a child, she often stood at the kitchen doorway, watching her mother smile at everyone else, but never at herself. Diane witnessed her mother's dreams dissolve, not through dramatic events, but like waves quietly receding, leaving emptiness and disappointment. Laughter was replaced by the clinking of dishes, and mirrors that once reflected radiant beauty now only reflected exhaustion. Diane realized that her mother's life was a warning rather than a roadmap, and from that, she silently vowed, "I will not live a life like my mother's." While other girls of her time dreamed of peaceful homes, Diane dreamed of freedom, of stage lights, of stories and roles that could reflect her true self. School was not exactly a comfortable place. Diane was called odd and difficult by friends and teachers alike. But it was precisely this difference that ignited a quiet fire within her. She did not falter. Diane found in acting a space where she could live authentically. The first time she stood under stage lights, playing Blanche Dubois, she trembled, but the trembling was not from fear, it was survival. That was the first time Diane truly felt understood. All the years of loneliness and silence had become part of her soul, so that every emotion, every line spoken on stage became the breath and heartbeat of her life. I imagine little Diane standing in the classroom, eyes focused on everything around her, but her mind already reaching toward scripts and stage lights. Her rebellion was not loud or showy, but quiet yet intense, like a volcano forming slowly inside, waiting to erupt. From these experiences, Diane learned that to survive, sometimes you must create your own world, a place where you are free to be yourself. Every role, every smile on screen, was her way of telling the world, "I exist, I am not a copy." What is remarkable is that Diane did not seek perfection. On the contrary, she learned to turn imperfection into strength. From the little girl who witnessed her mother's disappointments, she gradually became a woman who could transform pain into art, silence into her own language. Every glance, every smile Diane gave on screen carried part of her childhood story, of long nights observing and quietly reflecting. She poured her whole life into each role, not to display herself, but so that others could find themselves within it. Looking back, that silent childhood shaped the Diane Keaton the world would later come to know. She turned loneliness into strength, loss into emotion, imperfection into beauty. And all of it began from a silent vow, "I will live my own life, not follow the path of someone else." When Diane stood on stage or appeared on screen, no one could see how many years of quiet, how much pain and longing for understanding she carried. Yet because of those years, Diane became an icon, a woman not only loved, but respected for her ability to turn personal emotion into living, immortal art. By 1966, Diane Keaton was just 20 years old, yet she was ready to pack all her dreams and pain into a single suitcase and leave Los Angeles to find herself in New York. She enrolled in a small theater, carrying both the unfinished ambitions of her mother and her own quiet rebellion. She dropped the surname Hall, taking Keaton, her mother's maiden name, both as a tribute and an act of defiance. "When someone says Miss Keaton, they are saying my mother's name," she whispered, as if healing old wounds through art. And now, as the world mourns her, That vow still echoes through time. The child who had drowned in silence had become a woman who transformed silence into her greatest voice. That silence followed her into the chaotic, noisy streets of Manhattan in the winter of 1966, a season that seemed to punish the city. Gray, endless, and bone-chilling cold. Diane stepped off the Greyhound bus from Los Angeles, carrying a worn suitcase, 2 tattered scripts, and the fragile courage of someone determined not to vanish. The city's first gust of wind hit like harsh, indifferent truth. She found a tiny apartment on the Upper West Side. Wallpaper peeling, walls thin enough to hear neighbors' arguments slip into her dreams. The heater coughed instead of warming. Windows leaked cold like a wound. Every night, Diane slept in her coat, her breath fogging the glass as snow pressed against her pane. Outside, the city glittered and roared, but in that room, silence was louder than any sound. Diane quickly realized New York was not a dream, but a test of endurance. Survival here was not luck, it was an art. Gray, bitter mornings. Standing in long lines for auditions that ended before they began. Tiny rooms above cafes, thick with cigarette smoke and disappointment. Too high, too alien, not her world. Rejection clung like frost, but Diane kept moving, thin shoes, fragile pride, and iron will. By noon, she was a waitress, serving tables no one remembered. At night, she sang in smoke-filled basements, her trembling voice rising above murmurs and the clinking of coins in jars. On the coldest nights, wind screaming through alleys, she walked the streets to stay warm, too proud to ask for help, too stubborn to quit. Sometimes, she shared a sandwich with another young actress, both laughing at their hunger, laughing at the cruel humor of youth, invisible yet alive. Later, she would say the radiator only coughed, it never warmed. But she stayed, because fear was always present, and that fear became her fuel. It helped her survive weeks of hunger and months of silence. Dinner often consisted of tea and half a slice of bread, which she pretended was enough. She pawned old shoes to pay rent, skipped the subway to buy coffee, wrote lines by candlelight during blackouts. Some nights she pressed her hands to the cold window just to feel something real. Some mornings she wrapped her scarf twice and walked miles to save a few cents on the bus. The city was loud, she would later say, but she had never felt so abandoned. Her notebooks were full of words no one read, letters to her mother, to herself, to dreams she refused to bury. When despair came too close, she whispered to the darkness, "Not yet." And from that shadow of loneliness, a quiet fire began to burn. A relentless, sacred hunger that would not die. In those cold, hungry, lonely months, Diane Keaton began discovering her true strength. Perseverance, courage, and the desire to live authentically shaped the woman the world would come to remember forever. By 1968, after 2 years of rejection, fear, and near starvation, a call came, a call that would change everything. A Broadway play called Hair was searching for a raw, unpolished face, painfully authentic. Diane walked into the audition room, barefoot, trembling, yet vibrantly alive. For the first time, she was not performing to be accepted. She was performing to survive. When the director quietly watched her, he whispered, "Don't change a thing." Opening night, Diane stood under the brilliant lights, her heartbeat echoing in the darkness. As the music swelled, something inside her broke open. 20 years of silence she carried finally burst into sound. The audience didn't see perfection. They saw truth. And when she later said, "I built myself out of fear," it was no metaphor. It was a confession. Fear, hunger, abandonment, cold, they were the bricks and mortar of Diane Keaton. Each no taught her to stand taller. Each unpaid bill sharpened her humor. Each lonely night forged a courage that would one day define her. Long before Oscars, before The Godfather, before the world called her extraordinary, there was only her, a young girl walking through the snow with empty hands, her breath visible in the freezing darkness, and a spirit unwilling to freeze. This is where a legend begins, not in comfort, but in the cold. Not in applause, but in silence, where she learned to speak. New York snow melted into stage lights, and the silence that had enveloped Diane's life was replaced by applause echoing across the world. From a trembling girl singing for spare change, Diane became a face defining an era. In 1972, The Godfather arrived, opening the door to everything. As Kay Adams, she stood in the shadow of Michael Corleone, a silent witness to power and loss. The film brought her more than fame, it gave her the voice she had been seeking since childhood. Then came Annie Hall in 1977, a role that etched her name into film history. The shy laugh, the turtleneck, the unguarded honesty, all not costumes, but Diane herself. For the first time, Hollywood didn't just see a woman on screen. They saw truth wrapped in imperfection. The world loved her, and the film industry bowed. Before Annie Hall, Diane lived in cramped audition rooms, sang in smoke-filled basements, walked the cold streets of Manhattan with empty pockets. She learned to listen to fear, to turn hunger into resilience, solitude into strength. And then it all exploded on Broadway, on the Hollywood screen. Every role, every glance, every smile carried her story, a story of a girl once abandoned, once trembling, but never defeated. Diane's career was not a straight path. It was a journey of slow, painful steps, full of trials, yet full of life. Rejections, lonely nights, snow-covered days seemed to forge her, making every line, every step on stage feel real. When she stood on screen, when she spoke, the world heard the truth, a truth not perfect, but alive, moving, and immortal. Looking back, Diane Keaton turned fear into art, silence into her own language, solitude into power. She was not just an actress, she was an icon, a woman who taught the world that truth, not perfection, is what connects us and moves us deeply. From trembling steps in snowy Manhattan to the sparkling lights of Broadway and Hollywood, Diane wrote her own story, a story of resilience, courage, and authenticity, a story the world will never forget. She was 31, holding the Oscar under the glaring lights. In that moment, Diane Keaton felt she had finally arrived. All the struggles, all the lonely nights, all the trembling on Broadway stages, now crystallized in her hands. But when she returned to her empty apartment that night, the applause still echoing in her ears, she placed the statue on the kitchen counter and wondered, is this what it feels like to be seen? Every spotlight casts a shadow, and hers grew larger by the day. Success, envied by millions, suddenly became a cage only she could feel. Each new script carried a silent question. Could she continue to be this good? Fame is dazzling, brutal, and uncontrollable. On set, Diane worked until her hands shook and her eyes burned, memorizing lines long after the crew had gone home. I couldn't sleep, she later admitted. I was afraid to stop. Between scenes, she hid in dressing rooms, rewriting lines no one asked her to. She chased a perfection that didn't exist, a truth only she could sense. The higher she climbed, the thinner the air became. Her natural laugh sometimes sounded rehearsed, as if burdened with the weight of the world. Every appearance, every glance, was Diane performing Diane. Some nights, she drove through Los Angeles, the window rolled down, cold wind biting her face, trying to remember the simple feeling of just existing. I thought success would make me whole, she said. But maybe it just lets you fall in front of everyone. Every light, every clap, didn't heal her, it reminded her that fame carries deeper solitude. In 1981, when Reds premiered, Diane poured every ounce of intellect, heart, and composure into her role. She admitted, I remember crying in the car after filming. Not because I was sad, but because I had nothing left to give. The film succeeded, but I felt empty, like a candle burning so beautifully it couldn't bear its own flame. In the silence after triumph, she felt the inevitable solitude. The 1980s brought new challenges. Films faltered. The ambitious, exacting 1984 film The Little Drummer Girl earned only half its $8 million budget. Critics were cold, box office colder. For a woman who had defined modern cinema, it felt like free fall. Everyone thought I was on top, but inside, I was slipping, she recalled. For a while, Diane vanished from screens. Not due to failure, but exhaustion. She refused million-dollar roles if they lacked truth. Hollywood that once chased her had moved on to younger faces, fresher stories. Yet Diane knew only truth and personal emotion could keep her grounded. The world looked at her success, awards, and lights, but only Diane knew the loneliness behind the performance. Every night on stage, every line, every glance carried years of silent struggle, lonely months, cold Manhattan nights, and cramped New York basements. This forged the strength the world would later admire. Diane didn't chase perfection. She learned to turn pressure, fame, and solitude into art. Every red carpet step, every scene, every smile was an expression of a woman who knew her life could not be just applause. It had to be truth, existence, and the silent power within. Looking back, the years after her peak revealed that Diane Keaton was not just a cinematic icon. She was proof that success and loneliness, light and shadow, can coexist. She learned to live with pressure, to turn quiet moments into power, and to give the world performances as true as her own soul. Yet Diane never stopped. She kept searching, walking between the light and shadow of herself, where every glory comes with a price. She wrote scripts, directed, and quietly rebuilt herself in corners the world had never seen. The applause will fade, she told a young actress, but the work is what saves you. Diane learned to find peace in solitude, to understand that art is not medals or fame, but prayer, a way to exist. Each day she faced loneliness as a relentless challenge. Every role, every scene, was a battle with herself, a test of courage. Diane discovered that dazzling lights could burn, and true glory is heavier than anyone imagines. Sleepless nights, trembling hands, whispered doubts, they all became the building blocks of Diane Keaton's legend. The woman adored for her gentle laughter created that laughter from fear. Every smile, every glance on screen is a testament to years of quiet struggle, sleepless nights under cold lights, and unseen moments. Diane paid for freedom, for art, with pieces of herself. Oscars, red carpets, unforgettable roles, these are just the surface. What truly shaped her were the silent tears, 3 a.m. shoots, and the courage to keep going when the world had turned away. Diane realized the brightest lights are often the loneliest. Yet she never cursed them. They revealed her true self, and that was her quietest, deepest victory. She learned to live with solitude, turning it into inspiration, silence into art, fear into the laughter the world admired. Each project, each film, was no longer a race for praise or fame. They were prayers, a way for Diane to connect with audiences through her soul. Even when the lights went out, when the audience left, she kept creating, because that was how she existed, how she lived fully. The woman who once trembled, walking snowy Manhattan streets with empty pockets and fragile courage, became a symbol of inner strength. Not for awards or fame, but for turning loneliness into living art, fear into laughter and eyes the world admired. Diane Keaton teaches that silence, solitude, and unseen moments truly shape a person. She lived between light and shadow, fame and solitude, and transformed it all into art. Diane Keaton turned her life into an endless performance, where every moment, quiet or brilliant, proves the strength, courage, and freedom she paid for. Somewhere between noise and hustle, Diane found peace in the silence that once tore her apart. It was no longer punishment, but comfort, victory, art. The love for art and herself lasts longer than any spotlight or applause, and that is the legacy Diane Keaton leaves to the world. Even now, as the world mourns Diane Keaton, that love lingers, haunting each frame she leaves behind. It was never a headline romance. It was a secret symphony, gentle, steady, destined to echo long after the music has stopped. Every great soul carries a pain time cannot erase. For Diane, it was Al Pacino. They met on the set of The Godfather in 1971. She was 25, radiant, laughter unrestrained, eyes full of endless hope. He was 31, intelligent, elusive, almost lost in the shadow of his own genius. From the start, an unspoken rhythm hummed between them, a frequency only two lonely hearts could hear. Diane later confessed she had been captivated by him from the very first moment, a subtle, inescapable pull. To the outside world, they seemed calm, but they recognized each other's pain. Not a fiery passion, but mutual acknowledgement, the understanding of craving a world yet feeling it fall short. Their early years together held a quiet, irresistible happiness. Between long shoots, they sat side by side, silence profound, occasionally reading lines from scripts, sharing moments words could not capture. Joy was found in the smallest things. Morning sunlight through the studio walls, just looking at each other and laughing. Diane made him laugh until he had to cover his face. He made her feel safe in a demanding world. "We don't need to talk," Diane said. "Just being here is enough." After long filming days, they drove through Los Angeles with the windows down, Sinatra on the radio, her laughter mingling with the wind. Evenings were simple. He cooked pasta in their tiny kitchen, she brewed tea, they sat cross-legged on the floor, eating, talking, laughing at trivial, yet beautiful things. When he dozed off on the sofa, Diane watched him in the dim light, imagining a life that could be. Sunday mornings with newspapers and laughter, small birthday parties, children's dark eyes, her crooked smile, and love intact, undefinable. For Diane, it was the purest and most dangerous love. Not flashy, not validated, yet absolute. She believed that one day, when Hollywood's noise quieted, they would build a lasting home, where light, sound, and images merged, where connection existed without proof. It was peace amid life's storm, a love not bound by time or fame. Every smile, every glance held understanding and pride. The world might misunderstand, but they knew that silence was the deepest language. Their love needed no spectacle, yet its strength endured, weaving through every scene, leaving an invisible but indelible mark. They shared mundane moments, toasting bread in the kitchen, rainy afternoons by the coast, silent walks filled with unspoken understanding. Diane felt safe in his eyes, he found comprehension in her smile. That love was a seed surviving through time, quietly yet firmly, enduring longer than any stage light or applause. Even as the world changed, when they were no longer young on set, that love persisted in every moment Diane Keaton appeared. It reminded her that true love doesn't need headlines or cheers, existing in subtle presence, in mutual understanding without words. Through the years, Diane learned to cherish this love as part of herself, as a silent, immortal art form. Looking back, she knew that this quiet, undefined love had shaped the woman the world admired, free, strong, and overflowing with emotion. Throughout the Godfather trilogy, the story on screen seemed to mirror the story Diane Keaton and Al Pacino were too afraid to reveal off camera. A love fierce, elusive, full of longing, yet never fully resolved. In Part 2, they wandered the streets of New York until dawn, their coats wrapped tightly around each other as a shield against the biting cold. He recited Shakespeare in a deep voice, and she responded with laughter brighter than the streetlights. Diane once said, "I thought that if I just kept showing up, he would look at me the way I looked at him." But Al Pacino was a man haunted by distance. Fame and fear kept him wary of doors that might lead to pain. Commitment, for him, was like a cage. Years later, he admitted he avoided doors that could bring suffering. And Diane, with all her courage and loyalty, still stepped through each one, eyes fixed on what the world dared not face. By 1990, when The Godfather Part 3 began filming in Rome, Diane was 44, but hope still burned within her like a stubborn flame that refused to go out. They lived together in a villa overlooking the Golden City lights, dining on a balcony strung with fairy lights, laughing over old memories that felt like unbroken promises. Diane often imagined how his name would appear next to hers on an envelope, imagining their children inheriting both his passionate fire and her enduring faith. Those around them thought this was the final act, the closing scene of a love story that had waited 20 years to be named. But for Diane, it was more than an ending, it was destiny finally arriving. She believed that after all those years of waiting, their story was ready to conclude, not in silence, but forever. Every moment together during filming, quiet evening walks, subtle smiles, became part of an immortal memory. Fleeting glances, gentle touches, they were like notes in a symphony only they could understand. Diane realized that true love doesn't need declarations or the spotlight, it exists in the small moments, yet its power transcends time. They didn't need long conversations. A look, a smile, a silent pause was enough to understand one another. And in those pauses, Diane learned to cherish every moment, both joy and solitude, realizing that true love may not always shine brightly, but it is always profound and enduring. The city of Rome, with its pale golden lights, silent streets, and the villa where they shared countless nights, bore witness to a love the world could only admire from afar. Diane learned to hold peace within her own heart, even as the outside world roared. Love with Al was not just joy, but a challenge, a flame that tempered her soul, shaping Diane into a woman strong, free, yet deeply emotional. Even now, looking back over the entire journey, Diane knows that all those moments, from the laughter on set, the quiet evenings in the city, to the golden glow of Rome, formed a silent, eternal love story. It was not a story written by the world, but a story Diane and Al had lived, breathed, and loved in a way only they could understand. And that is the most remarkable part. Love may remain undefined, unlabeled, yet its power and influence surpass all limits. For Diane, that quiet love endures in every frame, every smile, every cherished silent moment. It is proof of a life fully lived in art and emotion, where hope, patience, and courage ultimately converged into something everlasting. One evening, under the slowly falling sunset of Rome, Diane Keaton finally voiced the pain she had carried for 20 years. The air glowed golden, as if even suffering could be sacred. "Marriage or goodbye?" she whispered, her voice trembling, not with anger, but surrender. The last prayer of a woman who had waited too long for a choice. The table between them was littered with slightly soured wine and untouched bread, remnants of a night that seemed endless. "I can't live in this void anymore," she murmured. Outside, olive trees stood still, their silver leaves cold under a sky colored with forgiveness. Somewhere, distant church bells chimed, a low, melancholic note that seemed to pause the world. He looked at her, then away. No storm, no argument, just the quiet, uncomfortable stillness of a man retreating within himself. That silence, gentle yet cruel, was his answer. He didn't need to say no, she would whisper it later. The silence spoke for him. In that instant, something bright, stubborn, and hopeful inside her shattered. The woman who had waited years for words realized she might die without ever hearing them. That night, she quietly packed, folding her dreams among clothes scented with wine and regret. Before dawn, she stood by the villa window, watching the horizon slowly light up. The sky was indifferent, the city still asleep. She didn't cry. She simply left. As the plane took off, Rome stretched beneath her like a painting she would never enter again. The seat beside her had always been empty, and now, it always would be. Days later, the phone rang. Her father had collapsed from a brain tumor. While mourning a love lost, she began losing another. Two griefs struck simultaneously, tearing her heart apart. "That's when I fell," she said years later. Not in tears, but in quiet shattering. Airports, hospitals, funeral flowers, all blurred into a haze of white rooms and unspoken prayers. During her recovery, Diane sought the woman she had been, tracing all she had given away. "I begged him to love me the way I loved him," she admitted, voice trembling even decades later. But love doesn't always echo back. She painfully realized that some love departs through absence. True cruelty was not in rejection, but in the silence that follows. In the years that followed, Diane rebuilt herself the only way she knew, through art, laughter, and work that demanded everything but only offered fleeting peace. She never married, never sought public love again. "I guess I waited," she once said softly, though she didn't know what for. Instead, she poured her soul into the world, cinema, restoring forgotten homes, and two adopted children, Dexter and Duke, whom she called her eternal loves. Even as her laughter returned to the screen, it carried a timeless gentleness only women who understand loss and continue living can possess. Her characters aged with time, humorous, brave, solitary, unshakable. Through them, Diane told her own story. That suffering never truly ends, it simply teaches you how to walk with an open wound. In 2017, the American Film Institute honored Diane Keaton with a Lifetime Achievement Award. The auditorium shimmered under chandeliers, applause filling the air, ghosts of the past lingering among the audience. Diane stepped onto the stage with a gentle smile, but deep within, her heart carried memories only she knew. Then, from the wings, Al Pacino appeared. The crowd gasped, time seemed to freeze, and years of heartbreak merged into a single heartbeat. He walked to the podium, older now, eyes softer, voice wavering between emotion and memory. "I will love you forever," he said. The audience erupted, yet Diane did not cry. She smiled quietly, a smile steadfast, belonging to a woman who had experienced every kind of sorrow. She had shed all the tears the world would never see, in therapy rooms, midnight kitchens, long drives home, rehearsing goodbyes no one would hear. That night, her smile spoke what her soul had long accepted: some loves never end. They exist as ghosts, silent but breathing, and Diane carried that ghost into the final days of her life. When asked if she regretted never marrying, she smiled faintly, exhausted. "No," she said, "I had everything I ever wanted, except what I once thought I needed." Diane realized that love isn't measured by time, vows, or photographs. It is measured by how profoundly it changes you. Al Pacino changed her, not by staying, but by leaving. Surviving that love, Diane Keaton became proof that some hearts are too vast to be contained within a single lifetime. Her story is not just about pain, it is about resilience, grace, and courage blossoming amid the ruins of life. A woman who gave her heart to someone who could not keep it, yet continued to love the world. Even now, as her name enters cinematic history, that love exists between two souls who never learn to let go. It is the cruelest, most beautiful love, never dying, haunting quietly like a whisper long after the person has gone. It breaks you, yet somehow makes you whole. Pain does not knock, it shatters the door. Diane witnessed the love of her life slip away in that brutal breath. Yet within that loss, she found strength and freedom. She became a symbol, independent, courageous, yet full of emotion, willing to live with an open heart and unafraid of solitude. Every glance, every smile, every quiet moment became an anthem of survival, of love, and of the art of existing. Diane is more than a star. She is proof of the endurance of the human heart, the power of continuing after loss, and the value of silent moments the world never witnesses. She learned to hold memories without being imprisoned by them. She learned to love the world, to love art, to love the children she adopted, to love herself, a love deeper than any vow. And looking back, Diane knew that all suffering, tears, and losses led her here, to a place where love is no longer measured by presents or words, but by the profound changes it leaves within. That love remains, quiet, relentless, yet absolute and eternal. Just weeks after returning from Rome, where hope had taken her final breath under Italy's fading sunset, Diane received devastating news. Her father, Jack Hall, had collapsed. The diagnosis, a brain tumor. The moment was ruthless, as if life itself had decided to strip away everything that had ever held her upright. The hospital reeked of antiseptic, machines whirring with false sympathy, their hum echoing through the sterile white walls. Diane sat by his bedside, holding the hand that had once guided her to school, whispering fragmented words into the emptiness of the room. "Don't go yet, Dad. I'm not ready." But death never waits for permission. Jack Hall had always been her silent anchor. He never told her to be softer, smaller, or more lovable. He had waited quietly outside auditions, reading his paper, ready to walk her home regardless of the outcome. Those small reassurances had lifted her courage when the world tried to break it. He was proof that love could endure, that care could exist unconditionally. Losing him felt like the last light in the house had gone out. Even after his passing, the desk lamp remained on for weeks, as if even electricity refused to acknowledge reality. Diane would enter the study, touch the worn wood, whisper, "I'm trying, Dad. I'm really trying." But silence answered, and such silence can transform a person forever. The following months were a slow, unrecordable descent. Diane could not look in mirrors. Her reflection seemed a stranger. Her famous wit turned inward, piercing instead of shielding. Friends stopped calling, she stopped answering. The house grew quiet, not haunted, but haunted by absence. She would later admit, years on, "I crumbled from there." Not loudly, just quietly, piece by piece. Mornings passed with tea she forgot to drink, nights with a lamp left on in case sorrow decided to leave. Therapy became a ritual, not to heal, but to survive. Week after week, she sat in a small room, confronting years of silence, facing truths she had evaded her whole life. Love for her had always been a waiting room. "I don't think people understand what it feels like never to be anyone's first choice," she confessed decades later. "It's not bitterness. It's a fact etched into your bones. I lost two men who shaped my heart, one to death, one to distance. And somewhere in between, I lost myself too." The pain was not cinematic. It did not play out under lights or in grand gestures. It lived slowly, quietly, ruthlessly. In empty rooms, in the hum of a midnight refrigerator, in the echo of footsteps through corridors once filled with laughter. Fame could not fill it, awards could not numb it. Pain accumulates, grain by grain, until one day, you realize you are buried beneath it. During those months, Diane learned to face loss without destroying herself. She learned to live in silence, to observe the void without surrendering to despair. Every touch of memory, every deep breath in an empty room, reminded her that existing was not just living, but enduring. Enduring to keep going, to smile again, to create art from sorrow. Ultimately, Diane did not seek salvation from others. She chose to hold memories, cherish sacrifices, and embrace love that could not be reclaimed. Those quiet months became the foundation of a new Diane, brave, resilient, free, yet still profoundly emotional. She found strength in art, in laughter, in work, and in the genuine relationships that remained. Diane understood that pain is not meant to vanish, but to be woven into life. It may never leave, yet it can become a part of you, shaping the person the world sees today. And she moved forward, through all the darkness, with a heart wide open, ready to love, to live, and to continue creating immortal moments, even knowing that loss would always be a part of them. From the ashes of loss and decades of heartbreak, Diane Keaton accomplished something few could imagine. She began to rebuild her life, slowly, deliberately, without waiting for anyone to return. Every step was a challenge, yet also a journey of self-discovery. She learned to live without the illusion of rescue, and then realized with quiet astonishment that she no longer needed saving. The silence that once shattered her became the space where Diane finally learned to breathe, to feel the steady rhythm of life again. Within that quiet, she discovered strength, a constant in herself independent of anyone else. Fleeting dreams and lost loves now formed the mosaic of a life she crafted with her own hands. Long before her final dawn, Diane had built the family she truly needed. After years of giving her heart to loves that slipped through her fingers, she discovered a new devotion. Not romantic in the flashy Hollywood sense, but eternal, deep, and unwavering. In her 50s, while many stars retreated from the screen, Diane embarked on a new journey, motherhood. In 1996, she adopted her daughter Dexter, and 5 years later, her son Duke. "I thought I had stopped loving," she admitted. But they arrived, and love returned, not loudly, not claiming the past, but genuinely and vibrantly. Her home overflowed with laughter, late-night conversations, music echoing through halls once haunted by solitude. Diane no longer sought the stage lights, nor did she live for temporary acclaim. Instead, she built her own world, where lunches made for her children, small stories, and playful jokes became the rhythm of a life full of meaning. She realized true love isn't about grand romance, but consistent presence, the family she had always longed for. Within those two young souls, Diane found the love she had been searching for, quiet, steadfast, immovable. They became companions through the winters of her life, bringing simple, profound joy. In her final years, Diane lived exactly as she had always been, unhurried, peaceful, free in the spaces she created, comfortable in the silence she had long known. Her Brentwood garden bloomed in autumn, lavender and sage perfuming the air, their vitality reflecting her own. Her silver hair caught the morning light like glass, glimmering silently but powerfully. Laughter that once filled studios now resided in her kitchen, alongside her loyal dog, softly prancing. She no longer sought the spotlight or fleeting admiration. She sought quietude, joy in the simplest things. Each dawn, Diane walked barefoot through her garden, whispering to the rows of trees, "You are still here." So am I. Within that silence, she found wholeness, a steadfast love, a family, and a home she had always dreamed of. This is how Diane Keaton chose to live, moving through pain, facing loss directly, and building a life independent of the past or anyone else. She became proof that one can find happiness within oneself, and that true love is not promises or lights, but the quiet, enduring moments whose strength withstands the test of time. On the morning of October 11, 2025, the California sun gently rose over Brentwood, spilling gold through the wide windows of Diane Keaton's favorite room. The library, her sanctuary, held a quiet reverence. On her desk, a cup of tea still steamed, her reading glasses rested atop an open journal, as if she had only just stepped away. Dexter, her daughter, noticed first the unusual stillness. Diane sat on her favorite armchair, head tilted toward the window, eyes half closed, lost in thought. No breath, no struggle, she had gone, leaving behind a subtle presence that lingered in the air. Dexter called her brother Duke, hands trembling, voice breaking. Both fell silent, feeling the emptiness that had replaced the house's once steady pulse of Diane's presence. That morning, the family announced Diane Keaton had passed peacefully at home, surrounded by light, love, and the world she had built herself. Peace for the world brought heartbreak for those who loved her. Dexter and Duke sat in the garden Diane had tended, watching the blooms that mirrored their grief. They shared memories of morning rituals, long walks, and journals filled with thoughts she had never spoken aloud. She used to say loneliness isn't loneliness, Dexter whispered. Now, it feels just like that. They chose no grand ceremony, no cameras, only candles, soft music, and words beneath the tree she planted. That evening, the house glowed from within, the golden light flickering like the warmth Diane had carried through her life. News spread through Hollywood and beyond. Fans paused, reflecting on the passing of the beloved icon at 79. People magazine confirmed first. Her image quickly filled screens, her perceptive eyes, radiant smile, iconic turtlenecks. TV hosts faltered mid-broadcast, voices trembling with grief. Online, black and white photos, laughter, and her simplicity flooded feeds. Outside Brentwood, small crowds gathered with flowers, candles, and neatly folded white turtlenecks. A handwritten sign read, "She gave us courage to be ourselves." Hollywood's greats shared grief silently. Al Pacino, once her great love, made a simple, trembling statement, "She was the silent mirror of my heart." Meryl Streep wrote, "She turned vulnerability into strength." Steve Martin recalled her as the wittiest, most insightful voice of their craft. Woody Allen remarked, "Before Diane, there was no Diane Keaton, and there never will be again." Bette Midler called her a national treasure. Leonardo DiCaprio remembered, "She was endlessly kind, curious, and fearless in being herself." Acting students across America performed her scenes, some weeping mid-take. Tributes streamed online, not as noise but with quiet gratitude. Cafes, classrooms, cinemas all felt her absence, yet her mark remained. Diane was more than an actress, she embodied elegance, silent strength, and the power to turn sorrow into inspiration. That night, the Academy screens lit with clips from Annie Hall, Reds, Marvin's Room, Something's Got to Give. Every frame, smile, and glance intertwined love and loneliness. Across theaters, viewers were silent. Grief was not cinematic, it touched individual hearts, reminding them of the kindness, resolve, and inner strength Diane lived her life by. The world collectively bowed, honoring a life of quiet courage and enduring presence. Diane Keaton was more than an actress. She embodied the feeling of being oneself, a mirror admired by Hollywood and the world alike. Every smile, glance, and graceful wrinkle told the story of a woman who laughed through suffering, who wore armor made of wit and unyielding spirit. Her passing was not merely the loss of a star, it marked the end of an era where authenticity still held value, where truth and emotion could quietly command a room and capture the attention of the world. That morning, when the newspapers faded and the morning noise settled, the Brentwood house remained illuminated, golden light spilling through the windows. Jasmine flowers swayed gently in the wind, as if even the earth refused to let her go. On her desk, her journal lay open with her glasses resting nearby, her final words inscribed, "I used to fear loneliness. Now I think loneliness is where love returns." Outside, the world wept, but inside that quiet room, her solitude resonated like a sacred note, a note she had sought all her life. Her story never needed display or fanfare. It was written in silence, lived fully each day. From her challenging years in New York, Diane learned to stand on her own, constructing a life with her hands and vision. That same silence began her story, and it freed her as she quietly departed this world. In the home she built, under California's gentle light, her final act was a quiet defiance of the fear of being forgotten. Now, she would never be gone. Diane's greatest legacy was never trophies or applause but the architecture of her life. Every wall, every brick, every window testified to resilience, to a heart unbowed by solitude or loss. Her $100 million estate reflected labor, sacrifice, and determination, yet its true value lay in a life lived entirely on her own terms, transforming imperfection into beauty and offering love and care to those around her. For half a century, Diane Keaton had been Hollywood's conscience. She reshaped notions of feminism, freedom, and imperfect beauty. The turtleneck, her witty smile, eyes that seemed to know everything but demanded no understanding, they became symbols. People remembered not only her performances but also the way she lived, loved, endured, and continued to smile amid chaos. The silent spaces of her Brentwood home still echoed memories. The journal, the steaming tea, the vibrant autumn garden, all extensions of Diane, a living imprint time could not erase. From these walls, the light through windows, the world learned that beauty need not shout, and presence requires no display. Diane Keaton taught us that solitude is not emptiness. It is where love returns, where true emotion finds refuge. Her admirers understood that each smile, each step, each glance contained the power to endure pain and live fully. Her departure left a silence that continued to inspire generations to embrace themselves, face loneliness courageously, and turn it into strength. Her legacy was not on magazine covers or award shelves, but in the way people remembered her, resilience, honesty, and turning simple moments into memorable ones. She inspired young actors, friends, and anyone who found light in her wit and gentleness. She reminded us that living fully does not require the world's recognition, only loyalty to oneself. In that home, Diane remains. Every morning, sunlight through windows, every breeze stirring the jasmine, every untouched cup of tea, reminders that she lived, loved, and taught the world resilience and gentleness. From this silence, we learn to value the immeasurable, love, courage, and the courage to be oneself. Diane Keaton's beloved Brentwood estate, valued at nearly $30 million, was more than a house, it was a living masterpiece, a sanctuary suffused with sunlight, ivy, and memory. Diane personally designed and restored every detail, from the ivy-covered walls to sunlight spilling across reclaimed wooden floors, each brick, each beam, each pane of glass bearing her fingerprints and vision. Within its walls, quiet hallways, black and white photographs of abandoned towns and forgotten warehouses, all reflected the essence of Diane herself. Friends called it the Quiet House, a name that now feels almost prophetic. Her children, Dexter and Duke, committed to preserving it exactly as she left it, a living archive of her artistry, solitude, and perspective on the world. But Brentwood was only part of Diane's vast real estate collection. Over the years, she became one of Hollywood's most respected visionary architects. She purchased and restored historic properties in Beverly Hills and Sullivan Canyon, transforming them into architectural gems featured in Architectural Digest and House Beautiful. "I love buildings the way some people love people," she once said. "You can save them. You can rebuild them." Through these works, Diane conveyed the notion of endurance in a world where everything else slips away. Her car collection reflected a similar quiet poetry. The 1960 Mercedes Pagoda, her favorite, gleamed in the Brentwood garage, a timeless symbol of elegance. Next to it, her G-Class SUV, a daily companion in her later years, stood like a faithful sentinel, silently guarding her private moments. Each possession held a story, a purpose, and a restraint, reflecting Diane's philosophy of balance between beauty, function, and discipline. Even her wardrobe, famed through decades of interviews and photo shoots, was meticulously maintained. Rows of black turtlenecks, wide-legged trousers perfectly pressed, hats stacked like sculptures of identity, all underscored the elegance and consistency she valued. According to those close to the family, Diane had long arranged everything with care, each detail deliberate, understated, graceful, her signature way of handling life. Her real estate reflected values she primarily shared with Dexter and Duke, along with causes dear to her heart: the National Trust for Historic Preservation, the Los Angeles Conservancy, and various mental health initiatives she quietly supported for years. She wanted to use her wealth to restore what time had taken, to transform beauty and care into enduring legacies. As a friend observed, Diane understood that whether a building or a heart, no grand declaration was necessary, just simple, unforgettable handwritten lines in her journal. To her children, she wrote, "You are my enduring story." In a sealed envelope, she added, "Do not sell the garden. Let it grow wild. That is where I will remain." These words resonated as a living legacy, not of material wealth, but of spiritual presence. Every brick, flower, and beam of light was proof of how she wished to be remembered: quietly, gracefully, meticulously complete. Brentwood was more than a residence, it was the embodiment of her life, how she loved, endured, and transformed the world into a more complete place. From quiet hallways to black and white photographs, from wardrobe to garage, every flower and morning tea reflected Diane Keaton, independent, refined, overflowing with love for enduring values. Entering Brentwood, one did not just see a mansion, one sensed the breath of a life fully lived, of a woman who poured her heart into creating a space to live and love. As Diane herself said, "You can save them. You can rebuild them." Not just houses or estates, but her life, saved, rebuilt, and continuing to inspire the world. Diane Keaton's art collection, worth millions, was a silent treasure beyond any monetary value. California landscapes, Edward Rouché's paintings, and sculptures by women she admired yet often forgotten, were meticulously curated by her. Diane arranged for many of these pieces to be gifted to the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, ensuring that women's creativity and beauty would remain a lasting imprint of her life. Yet, beyond numbers and possessions, her truest legacy was invisible. It lived in generations of women inspired to be self-reliant without regret, in the homes she rebuilt from ruins, and in the laughter echoing through cinema history. "People think money keeps you safe," she told Vanity Fair. "It doesn't. Love does." Diane lived, loved, and built from that love. When love departed, Diane learned to create safety through light, space, and resilience. Leaving the world, she left not just her radiant Brentwood estate but a blueprint for life itself, a life constructed brick by brick, through pain, through silence imbued with meaning. Her wealth was vast, but what she built from it was priceless. Every hallway, wall, door, and garden flower told a story, that even solitude can be sacred, and from loss, life can bloom. Beyond Brentwood's walls, as jasmine climbed and sunset light danced through windows, Diane's words lingered: "Everything I built began with what I lost. See what I found." Her greatness was never measured by screens or applause. It existed in the sacred space between chaos and calm, in choosing gentleness over grandeur, authenticity over showmanship. She never demanded attention, simply earned it with sincerity. Every laugh, glance, and quiet gesture bore her mark. With humor, courage, and a sacred authenticity, she redefined what it means to be seen. Diane was more than an actor, she was a philosophy of life, living true to oneself, honoring loss, and creating beauty from silence. Even her belongings, artwork, her Mercedes Pagoda, G-Class SUV, wardrobe of turtlenecks and hats, were treated as living entities, each with story, memory, and meaning. Entering Brentwood was like walking into a museum of stillness, resilience, and refinement, reflecting her intellect, courage, and depth. Diane taught that true power is not in wealth or fame. It is in disappearing yet leaving impact, turning solitude into creation, loss into living legacy. Every brick, painting, and laugh reminded us of perseverance and love. She inspired women to believe in self-reliance and to rebuild from loss. In every room, garden, and shaft of light, Diane remained. Not through spectacle, but through subtle, enduring presence. Every blooming flower, sunset ray, and musical note whispered her essence. Diane Keaton needed no audience, no applause. Being herself was her legacy. Her life was a lesson in love, endurance, and creating beauty from loss. It reminded us that invisible values, courage, authenticity, love, inspiration, matter more than material wealth. Anyone who walked through Brentwood, viewed her art, or heard laughter in her garden felt it. Diane Keaton left the world complete, quietly, unassumingly, yet profoundly and eternally. Long after the stage lights went dark, Diane Keaton still lingered, quietly burning like a gentle flame in the night. Her presence needed no fanfare, no grand display, yet resonated through elegance, kindness, and the profound power of silence. She often said acting is not pretending, but confessing. And her life was a series of confessions, revealed in trembling laughter, wordless tears, and eyes holding entire oceans, reflecting truths about the human heart. For countless women, Diane was more than a screen star. She became the mirror they sought, non-judgmental, imperfect, yet reflecting their true selves, with flaws, beauty, and authenticity. She taught them that solitude is not emptiness, aging is not decline, and love, no matter the outcome, is always worth the risk. In an industry built on illusion, Diane Keaton embodied gentle rebellion. She refused to disappear, inspiring women to find courage in themselves. Her generosity ran deep and silent, not for recognition, but for healing. Millions were quietly directed to the Women's Cancer Research Fund, Alzheimer's Association, National Trust for Historic Preservation, and Children's Hospital Los Angeles, each gift imbued with her care and spirit. Diane wrote, "Preserve what is good, whether a building, a mind, or a heart." Charity, for her, was not an act but an extension of artistry, a way to expand creativity. The same hands that restored historic homes reached out to mend invisible wounds. She believed in restoration, not only in wood or stone, but in people, memories, and fractured lives. She gave more than money, she gave permission to live naturally, to embrace ambiguity, to exist freely in a world that often forbids it. Emma Stone said, "Diane enabled women to be both brilliant and strange." Anne Hathaway called her a compass of courage. Every young actress adjusting a coat, tying a scarf, choosing authenticity over pretense, stands quietly under her shadow. Diane's shadow doesn't overshadow, it lifts, illuminates, and encourages. She proved that power needs no noise, and influence requires no performance. Diane Keaton lived fully, an artist, a silent mentor, and a source of inspiration for those seeking courage, love, and authenticity in a glittering world. She left not only films or awards, but enduring spiritual values. That, above all, is her greatest legacy, outshining stage lights and thunderous applause. Diane Keaton's influence stretched far beyond the camera. It seeped into fashion, art, the cadence of language itself. She turned imperfection into style, sincerity into power. She taught us that true rebellion is not loud or attention-seeking, but living fully and honestly with oneself. When asked what she hoped people would remember, Diane smiled, eyes sparkling, "That's what I've always strived for, what I loved most." And perhaps her greatest act of kindness was to keep loving even when love brought pain, to remain present even when life did not respond. Diane's story was never about endless victories. It was about resilience. About standing up after being hurt, continuing forward when others stopped, enduring beyond the applause. Legacy was never something she sought, it was who she became. Every word she spoke, every wall she restored, every soul she touched became part of a mosaic greater than fame. Somewhere tonight, her laughter drifts through the California breeze, light, playful, unafraid. Her garden blossoms as she intended, fragrance drifting through morning-lit windows. Dexter and Duke, her adopted children, greet the sunrise and feel Diane there. In the warmth of the space, the golden light, in loving silence, she is present in ways only close hearts can perceive. For those who grew up with her, who found themselves in her vulnerability and honesty, her absence is both painful and sacred. The silence she left behind is not emptiness. It hums with the memories and hearts of those who knew her, teaching how to live, to love, to laugh amid hardship. Diane never fades. She became part of the light, soft yet radiant, streaming through morning windows, illuminating goodness, the timeless values she left behind. She taught that real power lies in gentleness, that prominence needs no applause. Every small act, every subtle gesture, was a reminder of courage and truth. From her wardrobe choices to her care for her home, to her love and attention, Diane Keaton built a universe where humanity and art intertwined, where each moment carried meaning. Her life stands as proof of one philosophy: love, courage, and sincerity matter more than any glory. The world may change, people may leave, but Diane's light persists, present in every breath, every smile, every house, every garden she nurtured. She is not just an icon, She is an endless source of inspiration, a guiding light for those brave enough to live authentically, love fully, and exist amid the chaos of the world. If Diane Keaton's story touched your heart tonight, hold it there, like a gentle light in everyday life. Liking this isn't about numbers, it's a gesture of gratitude for the laughter she shared, the courage she inspired, and the love she left behind. If her life ever moved you, write Diane Keaton's name in the comments, not as a farewell, but as a promise that her flame still burns within you. The truest stars aren't in the sky, they live in our hearts, quietly shining, guiding every step we take. Every smile, every breath, every action you take inspired by her legacy is a reminder that that light has never gone out. Diane Keaton endures, immortal in our souls.